Welcome to the October 11th, 2022 Instructional Committee meeting. In attendance tonight are Board Member Jonathan Weinberg and myself, Brenda Hastings. Also in attendance is Superintendent Kathleen Murphy, Assistant Superintendent Kimberly Yarlott, Ellen Desmond from Central Office, Tom Crumrine, Mike Reardon, and Kylene Shalakas from Concord High to give us, I'm sorry, I said that
You're
wrong.
fine.
To give us lots of great information that we're excited to hear. So with no further waiting, we'll turn it over to Kim.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a full agenda for this evening. As part of my role as the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, I'm responsible for overseeing the implementation of various programs, and I just wanted to bring to your attention and to the public's attention two programs that are new this year after having been piloted last year at the elementary level. And this was two programs that are going to help round out and enrich our reading instruction at the lower levels. So the first program that I wanted to just briefly give you a very, very brief overview is called Heggerty. And this is being implemented, even though it's a K through 3 program, Heggerty is being implemented at the kindergarten level, and all the kindergarten teachers and related service persons received training on how to implement this Heggerty program. Basically what it is it's very explicit instruction on phonemic awareness, and it's sort of that auditory processing that students go through to be able to really understand how sounds work together, the individual sounds called phonemes, and how they work and interact with an entire word or a multisyllabic word. And they're very, very quick lessons. It's about 15 minutes a day that kindergartners receive with this program. Doing lots of work with rhyming, the initial, final, and middle syllables, blending and segmenting, and at the more mature level, actually manipulating phonemes and syllables. So you might say to students in a very, very quick, rapid test, like say butterfly, say it again, but don't say butter, and the students would come up with fly. So they would just be, it gets much more complex as they go on, but it's really being able to break syllables and sounds down. It's our intention that this program will help boost some of what we have noticed sort of pretty much nationwide with reading instruction. There most recently been a heavy emphasis on comprehension and fluency and less so much on phonics. So this is a well-researched phonetic or phonics program that has been adopted. The other one that has been adopted is a K through 3 program, although we're using it only K through 2. Our kindergarten teachers have been using this for a year or two now, and it was just brought into 1st and 2nd grade this year. This is called Fundations. A lot of times people want to say you spelt it wrong, but it's not. It's spelled correctly, Fundations. And Fundations comes out of the Wilson Language Early Reading Program. And it's, again, a very, very, very research-based, systematic, multisensory approach to teaching kids phonics. It's dissimilar to Heggerty, which is really focusing on the phoneme part of this. This is really having kids really understand structures of language. And the teachers will be receiving, the 1st and 2nd grade teachers will be receiving training with this program on our November 8th Professional Development Day. It's a very extensive training. It's really meant for the Tier 1 setting and delivered to all students. It could be used with students who are at risk to provide some targeted intervention. And I just wanted to bring this to your attention because it really does round out the balanced literacy approach, where we're really devoting some much needed time on the phonics with the younger learners. And again, with Fundations, they're also working on letter formation, so it's actually developmentally how to actually form a letter, sound mastery phonics, and it also incorporates some comprehension strategies as well as some written composition with spelling and the handwriting. The length of this lesson is approximately a half hour, although it tends to most often be incorporated in any small group reading lesson that you have, so that it's not necessarily a whole group, but would be kind of differentiated for students based on whatever level they're at and readiness that they're at within their guided reading program. And so the difference between the two is that, again, the phonological awareness is really for those kindergarten students with the rhyming, the sound segmenting, letter sounds, and the Foundations is more of an explicit phonics instructional program. And so I bring this to your attention because it's an important part of enhancing our overall reading instruction at the lower level. Any questions? Yes.
I apologize if you said this at the beginning as well. Where are we shifting from as we move into these new kind of phonetic reading models and understanding?
So this is an enhancement, so it's not shifting away from anything. We're still doing our guided reading and still working with Fountas and Pinnell and getting levelized readers into the hands of students and working on fluency and comprehension. But I would call this an enhancement to our program. And it's sort of recognized missing piece of the overall structure. The students do word work, so there's not to say that the program that they've had in the past did not have some of the phonics-based word work. This is just a more targeted, research-based, systematic approach to the early reading.
And do we have a rubric, I guess, that we're going to use to evaluate this?
So both of these programs were piloted, and the reading specialists actually looked at two different programs last year, Heggerty versus another variation of the word work, and selected Heggerty, so it was purchased over the summer. So it's gone through that vetting process already, and so thus the purchase and the implementation.
Thank
Great
you.
question. Any other questions?
Is there plans to bring it to the third, I think it said K to 3?
So we're going to work with I'm going to work with the reading specialist to determine, right now, as I said, Foundations is at K2.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be used? My hope is that the Heggerty is taught with such fidelity and the Foundations is taught with such rigor and fidelity that perhaps we won't see that lagging skills with phonics at the third grade level. However, I know of districts that have implemented it at the third grade because with COVID and the lack of instruction, that really needed some of those missing skills, those gaps for students.
So if it were, it may be a short-term thing to get students caught up, or it may be used more in small groups for more struggling readers.
Yeah, for a tier 2, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I appreciate the work that the reading specialists have done, and I shared this PowerPoint with them and said, are you on board with this presentation? They couldn't make it. However, we have to give them a lot of acknowledgement for the work that they've done to try to look at this gap that we have in our instructional program.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next, I think we're going to hear from Ellen Desmond on Title 4?
Is that 4A?
Okay. You know, I have my glasses, I should put them on. Yes, 4, okay, thank you.
Let me just
Can't see it.
We'll add Roman numerals to our lesson planning as well.
Yes. Once I can't see it. Can you see? Did you say 4A?
4A, yes. I can also share about 4B if you're interested, though that would be probably a longer presentation.
That's fine.
There are two separate funding streams.
Okay.
All right, let me see what's happening here. I think I need to change the settings on this. Well, I'll slide it over for now. I might be a little, there it is. It might be a little hard for me to read, but we'll see. All right. So, here we go. I'm going to try to keep this short. I gave myself in that little byline right there 15 minutes or less to give you a little overview of this program. Title 4A is one of the entitlement programs. It's the short name for it is Student Support and Academic Enrichment. It is a relatively new grant in the world of entitlements. It was first authorized under the FY 2017 reauthorization of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was kind of the newer version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. So it really was Congress's opportunity to, and the New Hampshire, or the U.S. Department of Education's opportunity to say, education is now about more than just academics, and we need to think about the way that we're infusing 21st century education with these three different buckets, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So our first grant was in FY 2018, and we've had subsequent grants since that. It's a formula-funded grant, so we get a certain set of dollars on an annual basis. That's our allocation. And it's broken up into really three different priorities. And access to a well-rounded education, so going kind of beyond those core content areas and looking at what it means to be a well-rounded student. That could be access to arts education, whether that's in enrichment in music classes. It could be physical education, health, things that are beyond ELA, math, science, and social studies, but certainly can tie into those core content areas. The second bucket is improved school conditions for student learning. So that's usually called safe and healthy students. Sometimes that second S is called safe and healthy schools. But same premise, the idea of making sure that the environment for student learning is an optimum environment for all. And then the last bucket is effective use of technology in order to improve both academic achievement across those core content areas, as well as digital literacy. And again, the focus on this was really, we're seeing just a different portrait of a student coming out of secondary education. How do we kind of back into that and think about designing programs that are multifaceted, are using technology in a way that's going to prepare 21st century learners, and then how do we make sure the environment in which they do all of those things is going to support their behavioral health, mental health, the whole child, and that's really where this came from. So we use this money, in the past we've used this money for direct services for students. We can use it for professional development. We can use it for salaries of personnel to carry out particular programs. It's very much a program-focused grant, so we design a singular program. It's meant to be supplemental and not supplant, so it's really an add-on. We can use it as like a pilot. Let's try this for a little while and see if we can really get at some of those needs that have presented themselves within a certain domain. And then we can also use it for supplemental educational resources. So that could be, licenses to things. It could be, contracted services. And then in some cases, equipment, which would be something above a $5,000 per cost, per item cost, I should say. But that's a little trickier. So the general kind of provisions of Title IV, these are some of the requirements scaled down, but if you want to go back and read the legislation, I'm happy to provide that too. I find it kind of fascinating because it's this great opportunity, but it has a lot of requirements. So the big thing is this ongoing stakeholder engagement, which the New Hampshire Department of Education has kind of dictated that we need to have a stakeholder team. So we have a team of folks that those buckets that I just talked about are represented by members of the district that kind of focus in those areas, which makes sense. So we've got instructional folks like Kim and Mary Wilson looking at that well-rounded education with our instruction. We've got Pam McLeod on our effective use of technology. The digital learning specialists are also going to be tied into that as well. And then we have John Fabrizio and Janine Richards kind of heading up that safe and healthy students bucket. And I try to look at everything holistically and make sure the money all shakes out. And then we have an opportunity for other people to sit on that team as well, including number 2 there, Our non-public schools are required to participate. That's a new thing this year, which I'm really grateful for, because it means that they're going to be at the table, not just one-on-one with me, but really at the same table as the rest of the team. So non-public schools, we are required to consult with them, and then if they decide to partake, then we do have to set aside a certain reservation of our allocation for equitable activities. So if we're doing a robotics program, we can design a robotics program that extends to the area non-public schools that decide to partake, and we can use our reservation for them to pay for, whatever they may need, essentially.
And is there additional funding that goes when other schools might be piggybacking, or is that just kind of using the existing funds that is allocated to the districts?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. It is in law that we are required to provide equitable services across all entitlement programs. Title IV and Title II are the ones that the private schools typically want to utilize, that legislation for.
And is this dictated via state or federal?
No, federal.
Federal. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Is this what we used this summer for the robotics program through Parks and Rec? Or would that not?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the same. It's the same. It's just we just got our new allocation. Yeah, but
Okay.
yes, that's kind of closing the loop.
Okay.
That
All right.
we can use that kind of money for that. We can use it for. I'll show you kind of what we're thinking for the next few years. But yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly. It's the same funding stream. Yeah. So every 1 to 3 years, we do a needs assessment that is required if your allocation is over $30,000, and ours is about $145 to $150. So we're well over that threshold. So we do a needs assessment. We did one in the spring. Tom was part of that. Tom was more than part of that, but Tom brought a lot of data to the table for that. So that's really our intention, is to look at data and make data-driven decisions. Obviously, then we have to make the application. We have to make sure that we're using the funds in an reasonable, allowable, and necessary way. You have to supplement, not supplant, and can't be used for the unfunded mandates. So anything that is in an RSA, we cannot use the funds for that. That's a requirement. And then the big thing is evaluation of the programs itself that we've designed. So we want to make sure that we're developing measurable outcomes and performance metrics. This grant runs on a 27-month cycle, so we want to make sure we have good data, but at the end of that 27 months to say, is this something that the district should be implementing? Should we do a scale up? Should we sustain it? Should we tweak it? What do we need to do to see if there's progress? It's also an opportunity for us to not dip into those local dollars for 27 months and figure out if it's going to be viable. And sometimes you developed, Title IV-A activities, and it's like, didn't really have the intention that we planned on. We learned a lot. We tried some things. We moved the needle a little bit, but it really is intended to be an enrichment, supplemental, let's try something, let's design something with the best of intentions, that's data driven, and see if it does move the needle. That's the aim.
Are you able to supplement for unfunded mandates? For example, not
Yes.
suicide prevention training, but can you do suicide
we do
prevention
it?
exercises or other companies?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we cannot pay for the 2-hour mandatory training, but we could train a trainer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And we
you.
can play around with that, the language to, yep, absolutely. Or above, if it was hours 3 through 8 or something, we could, that would be supplementary, absolutely. Yep. The kind of cool thing about any of the title programs, but one that Concord has in the past utilized, is that we can flex it. So if we receive, a good chunk of money through Title IV-A one year, and we're like, we actually have a lot of professional development priorities, or we have a lot of Title I priorities or something, we can flex that funding into another title program. So at any point, in consultation with the stakeholder group, we can determine if we want to take a part or the full Title IV-A allocation and actually use it as if it were a different title program funding. And we have done that in the past. We've taken a portion of 4A and flexed it into Title II. We did that about 3 years ago. I talked about the pilot. And then it's also a great opportunity for us to look really, holistically with those other entitlement programs. How can we supplement, what's going on in Title I? How can we supplement what's going on in Title III for our ELL program? Things like that. So we can really build off and look systemically and not just pick and choose little programs, but really braid and blend that funding. So that's that. This is a little nitty gritty, but I really like this graphic. Essentially what this says is we need to spend at least 20% of our allocation on that well-rounded education, that purple bucket. We need to spend at least 20% of our allocation on that safe and healthy students bucket, blue. And then we can spend up to 60% on technology. Of that 60%, we can only spend 15% on technological infrastructure, otherwise known as devices. So the goal is not to buy stuff, it's to develop programs. We can certainly buy stuff to aid in the implementation of those programs, but really we're looking at, from a sustainability standpoint, making sure that we're developing a pilot program or some kind of co-curricular program that's going to outlive just a device or a one-time supply purchase or something like that we're building the foundation for something that will last a lot longer. So in Concord, that's what it looks like here. So this is getting down to the nitty gritty, but I think it's important just to get a sense of, when we're talking about these program buckets, we're talking about, about $30,000 in those 20% line items, and then at least, I should say, and then, about 87,000 up to in that use of technology. And we wouldn't be able to spend any more than 13,000 on devices or networking, things like that, network switches, hard infrastructure.
So should it say 9/22/23 to 24 or on?
No, yes, it should.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep. Sorry, I'll change that before it goes into the folder. I'll change it so you have the accurate record. Yep, you're right. Thank you. And then our equitable services set aside, as I mentioned, that's based on enrollment numbers, so we don't actually have any control over that if more students end up going to non-public schools. And then we can take indirect, which is for administrative purposes, which is essentially how we get all of the reporting done and all of that with my team. So this is the crux of what I wanted to share with you now that I've kind of tried to lay that foundation. Based on our needs assessment that we did in the spring, I just pulled the top 2 or 3 bullet points within each of those buckets. So and I think Kim can attest to this too, the progress monitoring tool, both for the academic side and from a social, emotional, behavioral side, building the data collection, the dashboard. Tom can speak to that as well. Making sure that our data is up to date, it's accessible to students and staff, and that we're looking for patterns on a regular basis. I feel like we do a really great job with the data dives that the district does at the school level, here at the SAU level, and so really building on that has certainly been a driver and a focus, and then really thinking about that tier 2 support as you referenced. We talked a lot last time about we've got a great tier 1. We've got some good stuff happening at tier 3 on both the social emotional side and academically, but that tier 2 can be that gray area. Mm-hmm. And so to help kids who are in between without getting them to a place of really needing that tier 3 one-on-one support, we want to focus on tier 2 STEM and math interventions, and then some ELA interventions as well. And then on the but holistically thinking about the social emotional aspect of things, building up some of the more universal aspects, so those tier 1 aspects, that may end up having an impact on the tier 2 level as well. So evidence-based practices, which could be curricular decisions regarding an elementary school SEL curriculum, which has been a huge topic of discussion. We've made a lot of headway over the past few years in that area. And then a scale up of restorative justice practices. So again, these are things that are already in motion, but we want to continue to think about. And then prioritizing teacher training on effective use of tech tools. We obviously would need to tie in the student performance component of that because it does need to be student-centric. But thinking about what are the ways that we can better leverage technology and some of the tools that are already at play for maybe some more integrated learning opportunities that may actually tag on to some different courses that we could be offering or something like that. And then what training would be necessary for that? What professional development would we want to supplement? And then we talked a lot at our most recent stakeholder meeting 2 weeks ago about hands-on instruction, hands-on learning, project-based learning. I know it's been a buzzword, but there's a reason why, because it works, and that's a really good use. Project-based learning is a really good use of Title IV-A funding because it actually hits at all of those things in one program. So far, here's kind of what we're thinking, and then I would just ask for some feedback. Feel free to kind of noodle on it. I'll come back to another slide. Just happy to give you an avenue to weigh in or have other stakeholders weigh in. So we have received approval for the Fly 5 curriculum, which is that SEL curriculum at the elementary level for years 2 and 3, and that's a 3-year pilot. We have talked with Tim Herbert, largely at the high school, but then also potentially, hopefully, a little bit of work at Runlet as well, in training some student leaders to really move the restorative circles forward. So again, not a disciplinary team, but or decision-making team, but preventative, really student voice, culture and climate work as well. And then the non-public schools really echoed our desire to build that SEL curriculum work up as well. So they will be looking into what they want to pilot. We have given them the information about Fly 5, as that would be truly like lockstep equitable, but they could choose to pilot something else, but that would very much be in line with what we're doing. And then there's
I don't understand, what's non-public schools?
Private schools in Concord.
That's part of our grant?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't
Yep.
know that.
Yeah. It's quite a big reservation. It's about $35,000 this year that we have to reserve. Yep.
And do we have a list of the schools that are allocated?
We do. Yeah, I'm happy to share it with you. I can actually, they're all, are they all up here? Yeah, they're all up here. Concord Christian Academy will be paying for a Lexia license on their behalf, so it's an ELA intervention. Trinity Christian School, Let's Go Learn, that's a math and ELA license. St. John Regional School is looking into math intervention tools. And then we had talked a little bit about some math and STEM academies, so that could be both push-in and after school. And then they would like to run an art club as well. And then the final non-public school is Bishop Brady as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then for effective use of technology, this is like the biggie that we're really, I would love to talk further about this. We're actually just talking about ways that maybe CCTV could be engaged in some of this as well for some hands-on work. I would also say any community partner that is interested in pushing into the schools, this grant is the way to do it. And I love that because then it becomes a shared endeavor for our kiddos. So we're in the process of trying to figure out, based on our data, where are the areas, where are the skills that we really want to beef up some instruction, and then how can we design a program that's going to have that tech component that requires coding or some kind of design And then how can we not cushion it, but how can we infuse it with some social emotional instruction and some core content area interventions for those kids who those populations of kids who really need some extra academic support. We had actually a really good model of this, I think, in our summer programming funded through Title I. We had some explicit SEL instruction that was infused into the Title I reading and math instruction. So there were, things that the phys ed teacher was pushing into those tutoring sessions this summer, and doing some, body awareness instruction. The school counselor was doing some SEL instruction. So the idea of really packaging a program that looks at all three of these buckets, and kind of having a through line between all these three buckets is the goal of the grant. And it also makes for a really meaningful program design. We'll have a lot of robust data. We can look at the impact on, academics, on social emotional screen errors, and the implementation at the, from a digital literacy standpoint. We'll be able to see if all of those things can kind of come together in one program. So other things, you always have an open invitation to join the stakeholder team. It could be a great opportunity to just be that, liaison, because this is such a whole child grant. It's a great opportunity for some data insights to try your hand at program design if you're interested. And then, like I said, that liaising with the community that is increasingly becoming a goal of mine, to really share responsibility for some of the initiatives and lean into some of the youth-centric organizations that we have already in Concord, like the YMCA or the Concord Parks and Rec Department, things like that. So that's the information. Feel free to just let me know if you want to join. And then there's more money coming. At the end of September, the Safer Communities Act was officially, that bipartisan act was officially kind of accepted, I guess, by the US DOE, appropriated. So there's going to be a Strong Connections grant that will come out. The DOE has not, or our DOE has not received a ton of information about it yet, and they're trying to figure out what it's going to look like, but it will be under that Safe and Healthy Students bucket. And it will be a competitive grant. So we're on the lookout for that, so we can think about what could be supplemental. Not that we need more money at the moment, but we will.
Yes, absolutely.
So we'll be thinking about how we could really use it holistically. That's it. Any
Oh, I'm sorry. Does Title IV funding stay relatively consistent?
It does, yeah. So you'll see over the past few years, it really has, I think 2 years ago it was 142, then it was 145, and now it's 148. So it really only goes up by a couple $1,000s. Yep. It is based on enrollment as well. So that's always,
Is it like based off of free and reduced lunch at all? Or no, there's no socioeconomic.
Okay. Correct. Yep.
Got it.
Just on enrollment. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
One of the other things I think is important is that the board have an opportunity to share or suggest or recommend things that they'd like to see. That's why we bring these grant presentations like what Ellen just did to you, so that you have a chance to say, hey, what about robotics? What about hands-on science, programs? So if there are things that you all think are important, be sure to share that with us, because you may not be able to make those stakeholder meetings, but we do want the board to have input on our grants. And by the way, that was something that the board in general wished to have as a goal this year. So we're trying to make sure that your voice is heard in these grants.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. So
It is
that's
a
only
lot.
one of your grants.
Correct.
Correct. So,
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right. It looks like next we're going to be going to the high school staff for a presentation on increased credit options.
Okay,
Mr.
so the
Rear?
board, the board and Kathleen asked the high school to look at and make recommendations regarding raising the number of credits and the types of credits required to graduate from Concord High School. I think, as you're aware, we are at the state minimum and have been, I guess, for a while. I don't know historically how long, of 20 credits. Virtually all of our sister high schools in New Hampshire are between 24 and 28 credits. So I want to do, I'll get through this in 15 minutes. We can just stop.
I don't think I did very well on my time limit.
I wasn't even thinking about that.
We asked a lot of questions.
We did.
Oh, you're so good.
So this is just some of the questions that we're considering. Want to walk through these for a second?
So,
First of all, this is a qualitative, not a quantitative issue, and my distinguished associate to my right, Tom Crumrine, did some data work for us, and as you can see from this this graph, most of our kids graduate with 26, 27, or even 28 credits, which isn't surprising because if you play out our current AB schedule, you have a capacity to get 8 credits a year, which would give you 32 over the course of a 4-year high school career. Most kids are already doing that. So what we're really looking at, not all, but most, what we're really looking at is the quality of that education and how we can deepen that quality. And we're going to offer some specific things for you to think about as we go along. High school is a transitional, not a terminal academic experience. It's terminal if you're like 74 years old and you're still in high school. It could be considered terminal. But we recognize at the high school that kids are preparing for the rest of their lives. And our job is not to be an end in itself, but really to make sure that they have the skills and the conceptual understandings to be successful in whatever they're pursuing. We want fewer kids in study halls. That's a huge issue. But we don't want all kids taking 8 classes. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to understand that for the typical high school student, 14 to 18 years old, concentrating on 8 classes a week or at a time doesn't work very well. You know, high flyers, kids who are aggressive academically, they can do that type of work. For most kids, it's not a good idea. But it is not a good idea either to have a academic day where you might have only 2 or 3 academic classes and 1 or 2 studies a day. If that's happening every day, there's a lot of time that's being wasted and not used productively. If a decision is made to raise the required credits to, say, 24, we need to decide how and when those additional 4 credits will be added and which incoming classes will be responsible for achieving them. A big decision. What are the personnel implications of any increases we might make in credits? It's my understanding that when this was raised, the board agreed that they would meet the needs, the personnel needs that are implicated by raising the credit requirements. We'll talk about a little bit about that in a minute. Are there specific academic departments which should require additional credits? Hint, yes, there are. Should Concord High School require students to participate in an out-of-classroom academic experience, an extended learning opportunity, college course, a capstone project, community service, as part of their graduation requirements? Should Concord High School require community service? Do we have adequate, this is a big question. By the way, if you look in relation to this question here about whether we have adequate academic support for students who struggle now to make 20, you can see up there it's about 5% of the kids who graduated with 20 credits, exactly the base minimum. So if you think about it, the high school, we have the Diploma Academy, obviously we have a lot of seats at Second Start, which seems like every year we could use a few more. We have in fact, Ms. Chalaskis, you might want to take 45 seconds to talk about win days and how that affects kids who might be struggling academically.
Well, with the option now to have a schedule that allows for 45 minutes worth of enrichment or remediation during the school day that we're piloting this year on certain Fridays, we're trying to integrate support and student access to all teachers during the day to support their learning versus trying to do all of that after school or before school. So,
And as a competency-based education school, we encourage and expect that a lot of kids will be retaking their assessments. If they don't do well in the first time they try an assessment, our expectation is that they will get further formative work and then they will pass that assessment. Even if there's some change in its basic outline, they're still doing the same, working with the same competencies, the same conceptual understandings. How especially might this affect students with IEPs? That's hinting at the whole question of differentiated diplomas. I know that's an issue that John Fabrizio has raised. We do not, I know there's a Concord district diploma, but we basically do not differentiate diplomas, nor, and speaking for the high school administration, do we want to differentiate diplomas. Algebra 1 is often the tipping point for that type of thing, and it often affects kids with IEPs specifically and greatly. I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but those kids are working to their capacity. They are good citizens in our community and loved citizens in our community, and to give them a diploma that is not standard Concord High School diploma seems to me a miscarriage. But that's a topic for another night. And for the past few years, the art department has been unable to meet about 200 student requests for classes. So that will play out in some of the things we're going to talk about in a second. Did you guys have a chance to see this cover sheet that went out with the survey, the parent survey?
I don't think so.
Yeah. This gives a pretty good overview of the questions we're talking about. And you don't have to read this now, because we're going to kind of cover this as we go along. Yeah, we might as well take a quick look at some of this stuff. This is a survey. This is a parent survey. Went out to both Concord High parents and Runlet parents. Now remember that our current high school students, none of them are going to be affected. If we make a decision to go forward with raising the credits, none of them will be affected. The kids who will be affected are now at Runlet Middle School and frankly, the elementary schools as well. So one of the questions we asked was, are you in favor of raising the number of credits required? There were 272 responses, and it was 3-1 that they did support that change. Go ahead, Tom. If you answered yes to the first question, how many credits do you think Concord should require for graduation? And again, you see that most of the responses were for 24.
When I first saw that, I thought it was the 28. I'm like, wow.
changing grade. I know.
Those would be overachievers.
Yes.
Overachieving parents.
But I did see one student with 35 credits.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, taking online classes and,
3-0.
you know, various other things.
So just for your edification, that can happen for a couple different reasons. It can be students who take, a full load and then 2 online classes in the summer. It can also, some of them are students who stay with us till they're 21, now 22, and accumulate more credits. So there's a couple ways that can happen. But even some of Jonathan's classmates were above 30. It happens.
Do you award credit for algebra in 8th grade?
I think we should.
We currently do not, and it's always been a conversation.
Well,
Same thing
is it
for
my
world language.
understanding too now that they're aligning the math, the algebra at the high school and the middle school? And if that is the case, then we may want to consider giving credit for that, if it's the same course they're taking at the high school.
Right. Have you demonstrated that you can do the work, that you have mastered the competencies and accompanying skills, or have you not? If you have, what difference does it make where you take it? If you go over the summer, you go down to Mexico for, 8 weeks, and somehow you come back and you have the equivalent of first year Spanish, which is highly unlikely. But if you were able to do that, I think you should, and demonstrate that you did it, you should get the credit.
Do we know from when the survey was sent out relatively the demographics of the respondents?
No.
And how accessibility-wise was for maybe individuals who do not speak English as a first language or
I didn't
such?
ask that background,
Okay.
Jonathan. Go ahead, Tom. If the number of credits required for graduation were raised, are there specific academic departments you feel should increase their required credits? In my typically incompetent way, I left math off this list, but you can see that science and technology, business were at the top of the list.
And music and world language are at the bottom.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I would, but that's just me. I would be on the other end and wanting to invest more in our world language. I know the board has had this discussion as well about seeing different ways that we can reinvigorate the desire to learn a foreign language, and especially all the positive aspects that can come from music. So it's just interesting.
So do you want $1 million idea how to do that, Jonathan?
Do it in elementary school.
Yeah, bingo. Why fool around? They'll learn it. They'll learn German 1 in about a month, if that's what you wanted to do. If we were serious about teaching language. Go ahead, Tom. Would you support the idea of students having to complete out-of-classroom learning experiences like community-based work or college courses as a graduation requirement? And about 2-to-1 positive response to that. Was that the last question?
I think that's the last one.
Yeah. Okay. So that was.
I'm blown away by the math.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Kathleen.
is that?
What? No. That was a mistake because I left math off of the list.
I was gonna say, we're in trouble, but it's just an oversight.
So there's one more thing I want to look at.
Can we do that?
Yeah, could you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to kind of complete this introductory. Now, my understanding is that we're going to do a formal proposal in December?
December.
Yeah, okay.
To-
So here's,
To us or to the full board?
yeah, to the full board.
This is your sneak
This is
preview.
ours.
But you guys are going to make a recommendation, right? To the board.
Is that what you're
Well,
looking for?
Usually what happens is the committee makes a recommendation to the full board.
Right.
Are you asking for that tonight, or are you asking for that
In December?
before the December school board
I think
meeting?
we have one in November.
Whatever
right?
would result in a yes, we support it.
We have another meeting in November.
Yeah, I would think, Michael, that you might come back with filling out any of the, and,
Okay.
come back, do a presentation, and, so that they can take a vote.
Yep, okay.
And make that recommendation, which will be included in the school board for December.
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Yes.
Plan?
All right. So here's an idea for a possible rollout. So starting with next year's freshmen, for example, we raised the graduation credits to 22.5. That would be comprised of raising math, which is currently at 3 credits, which is unacceptable in my view, to 4. raising elective credits from 4 to 5. That would address the art question, but more importantly, it would get a lot of kids out of study halls. And I also, for the first year, put into social studies from 2.5 to 3 because we have that state-mandated civics exam looming in the horizon as another, speaking of graduation requirements. So you could do that the first year. And then say the second year, the class of 2025, raise it to 24. That would include the science credits from 3 to 4 and the out-of-classroom requirement, which is going to require considerable planning and preparation to see how that's actually going to work. But that's a type of rollout that, at least a plan for one type of rollout that we could look at for this type of thing. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing. One other thing. We are also going to do a survey of Concord High School students. I'll get that done this week. Kim and I thought about whether we should survey the middle school kids because they're the ones who are going to be affected. But I think we said basically, they really don't have the context to make. I don't want to insult the average seventh grader's overview of their high school experience, but I think it's a difficult thing for them to to understand the implications of a lot of this. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to get on CHS Live. I'm going to say to the kids, this is about your brothers and sisters, and your neighbors, your younger neighbors. And so what do you think as you look back, or maybe even for just a few months to over 3 years here, do you think that the requirement should be a little bit more stringent? And see what they have to say about that.
Is there still thought, I remember at one instructional committee meeting you proposed maybe different kinds of math classes that would be interesting to different types of students, like a statistics kind of thing, that would count as a math. Are we still looking at those kind of classes and offerings?
We have a, what's a financial literacy course?
That's what I was thinking.
Money management.
Okay.
So we're redesigning that course. Right now, it's a stopgap course for kids who have to get their third math credit and have not been particularly successful in that pursuit. A working understanding of economics is hugely important to any student graduating from high school. So that's not going away. In fact, it's not, that whole idea is not dissimilar from what Kylene's going to be talking about in a minute regarding junior English, as you'll see. So that's not going away, but that course has to be strengthened and refocused. So I think that's the kind of thing that we're thinking about.
Michael, didn't Graham make a presentation?
He did.
Last spring with the, I think there were 2 or 3
There was
Several
2
new
courses.
math electives.
math
Yep.
classes
And
that were exciting and
Have
kind of.
those started? Or-
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Okay,
year,
good.
so.
They're running that right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And would something similarly be devised for science?
Yes,
Which they
Which they
absolutely,
pretty
yeah.
much already
Yeah.
have. There are also now quite a few new Mr. Crumrine actually helped to spearhead science of survival. We have chemistry of what you eat.
Yeah.
We have quite a few new electives that we put in place several years ago that are highly engaging and
When we worked on because we did a 3-year working with Donna Pally and a representative section of science teachers. The redesign was, the idea was that you'd reach scientific literacy through the 12-year program, but that at the high school you'd have your core 2 years of mandatory, and then at the time it was 20 electives, and now it's even more than that. And what we've always prided ourselves in science was not just having AP classes, having a broad band in the middle of things like freshwater ecology, animal behavior, that are of interest to folks that want to do more, but maybe they don't want to do an AP class necessarily.
On the sorry.
Go ahead.
On that similar vein, would this also include, I guess, increasing AP class availability? Like I know we have AP US history and AP Euro, but we don't have like AP World history.
Yeah.
Or could it also include like starting a pilot IB program? Because I know when we were doing some of our info sessions, some parents came up and were like, "What if we did an IB?" So has that been part of the discussion?
See, I'm a big IB fan, but I would die of exhaustion before I got that done this year. So that's for my successor to think about. But yeah, your AP question, we'll be presenting on AP Art, AP Pre-Calculus. I think there was one more.
AP
other.
Pre-calculus. That's a
Yeah.
thing.
It's
Yes,
new.
It's new, yep. So, yeah,
You wanna go back?
we're, yeah. Yeah. International Baccalaureate's very cool. Big fan of that. But it's a big change,
Thank you.
yeah. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you.
Before we move on, can I just throw out one other thing on a slightly different topic? So we're talking about this stuff with raising the credit requirements. I just want to put an idea out that we need to think about sometime this year. Before the pandemic hit, we're a competency-based school. We take that very seriously. And our expectation was pre-COVID that every student would pass every competency in their given class, in their course. A competency being something fundamental to understanding the discipline, the course, and ability to go on to the next level. So when COVID hit, we correctly, I think, backed off that and said you just have to have an average of 2.5 or above of all your competencies. So we think we need to move back to that expectation of passing all competencies in order to get credit. So what that means, again, quickly, is that you could conceivably, and some kids will inevitably have a course average of 2.5 or above, which is passing, but not get credit because they haven't passed they're less than 2.5 in at least one competency. So, but what would happen is that they would just have to do some more formative work to get to pass that. But it is a distinct and more challenging way of approaching the work that's expected in a given class. So that's for future discussions this year.
Go ahead.
No, I was just curious.
Do you envision that this could be a problem if we were to do this year?
Well, it would be for next year.
It would be for
Yeah,
next
it
year.
would be
Wouldn't
for
be
next
for
year.
this year, then?
No.
Okay.
It will be for next year.
So they would have a whole year, students would
Yes.
have a whole year to understand the changes? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I've never been disappointed in students when we raise the bar.
Right.
And as long as we're there to support them and give them the resources to be able to do that, I think that's, I think we all have to have that attitude going in, that
Absolutely.
we need to challenge them. The last 2 years has really, 2.5 years have really been challenging for them, but I don't think we can back away from what we think they really need. And I give a lot of credit to the high school. They've been working hard on this since we talked about it, right?
Mhm.
So kudos. I think they're good things for kids.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. All right. Is that the end of this?
That's
I've lost
the
my
end.
agenda. Okay,
two
thank
more
you.
Question, you
Yes,
don't
no,
expect
yes.
any changes in social studies when you raise that credit from 2.5 to 3? You think you have enough
Personnel.
personnel and wiggle
I think we do. I think we
Okay.
do for
just thinking
math
of
and
it.
science as well, but that's to be determined
Yeah.
going
Well,
forward. But the other part, Kathleen, is that, and it took Kylene to point this out to me. Even if we need increased personnel, that wouldn't kick in for another couple of years anyway. Yeah.
Because your ninth graders
Yeah.
next year really have mostly required courses of 6 or 7 credits without any room per se.
Right.
You know, it's not like ninth graders have a lot of extra room in their schedule.
So we have time to plan
Right.
as we think about budget for
Right.
not only this year but the following year. That's important to
The,
know.
the curriculum facilitators seem to think that they might not even need an additional person. But
Because when you look at how many already take 24 to 28 credits,
Yeah. Right.
you're not accounting for an entire
Right.
grade level
Right.
requiring additional courses.
That's a good point, yes. All right, so I think now we'll move on to the high school presentation to changes on the grade level English.
Yeah, so thank you. And it was interesting that the meeting started with talking about phonological awareness. It's pretty amazing what we do with students in 12 years. And so I'm going to share a little bit about how we're shifting our 11th grade curriculum, truthfully, to meet the needs for the level of analysis and rigor that we need on the opposite end of the spectrum. So we have a bit of a convergence here between pathways and programming for students, and with an understanding of how media literacy is taught. The English department has known that media literacy has been pretty crucial and embedded in English language arts for a while. We, 24 years ago, created a media literacy required year-long course. But 24 years ago, 11th grade students didn't have cell phones. There was no such thing as TikTok. We didn't have 5th graders with cell phones 24 years ago. And media has changed a lot. And what most media literacy experts now say is that media literacy should be embedded, truthfully, K through 12. That the concepts of how you read media is something that should be embedded throughout English language arts courses. And we've known that, but have had a bit of a stopgap year where we feel like we've taught them all in that 11th grade year, so they're covered. But the world has changed a lot in 24 years in just those few examples. So as a result, what we want to do is embed media literacy curriculum in our English 9 and English 10 existing English language arts courses. So where it makes sense to discuss representation in the media, when it comes to sense of identity, we want that in English 9. When it comes to bias and who tells us the story about what America is, that takes place in English 10. And we want to embed those concepts in there. We also talked with Kim and Mike about also talking with Runlet and having some of the media literacy concepts occur in ELA in grades 6, 7, and 8 and do that work there. Because truthfully, in 2022, waiting until 11th grade is late and the world has changed a lot. So we'd like to move with that. So what you are going to see when we bring forward course proposals from the high school later on this fall is there's going to be on the docket a couple of new higher level 11th and 12th grade electives that are topical and contemporary in their media literacy concepts. But this is where the convergence with pathways and programming come to play. You heard Tom talk a little bit about how in the science program, the first 2 years are required and then you go on to electives. It is true that English has 4 required credits, so it's the most. However, we're the last department, if you will, that has a required must-take 11th grade course. And so what we're going to shift next year is that 9 and 10 are still required, English 9 and English 10. But starting with 11th grade, students will elect 2 half-year electives of their choice, starting in 11th grade. They could choose to take one of the media literacy topical, but they could also choose to take advanced writing college composition. They could choose to take creative writing and world literature. But our 11th graders, in line with that concept in Concord High School around pathways and having a sense of direction, and I'm taking a CRTC course my 11th grade year in automotive, and so it makes sense for me to take public speaking, and perhaps I've always had a love for poetry. They'll start that in 11th grade. The other thing that allows is for a lot of adjustments to student schedules. By 11th grade, a lot of courses are by semester, and so there have been times when English 11 as a full year course offered the same block has ended up challenging for students when they're starting to really take off on some individual pathways for their 11th grade. So I wanted to share that with you, just to kind of give you a heads up that that was happening. I will say that there are no changes to personnel. We still have the same number of students who will be taking courses, the same number of teachers. It does mean some changes to courses. Like I said, we're doing a review of where the core concepts of media literacy, the who's telling the story, who profits from this message, what techniques are used to influence or persuade my audience, where those will fit in grades 9 and 10. So we're doing a dive into that. And we do have a small group of teachers who are also working on the new course proposals. So those are the courses. I would say that this is a welcome change, but with every change comes some reluctance on losing something, and I share that with you in that I think, some teachers are worried that we're going to lose English 11 media literacy for all, but are coming around to the fact that we're going to be committed to embedding this in multiple grades over multiple years, and that's what's really important, because we really do believe that media is probably one of the most complex literacy skills that a student needs because of the layers at which you are receiving information. So that's pretty important, and we want to find ways to support students on multiple years on that front. So we will be coming forward with a couple new courses, but that's what I wanted to share.
That sounds like a great idea. Are we still going to read Team Rodin?
So you have a look on your face. I can read your face. So what are you thinking?
I'm wondering, it seems like it could be an area for a few landmines. And I'm wondering, will the content of the junior class English now, it will change because there'll be 2 half-semester courses?
No, they will be a re-envisioning of aspects that we believe are appropriate for more mature students when it comes to media literacy. So we're not just taking the existing English 11 course and putting it into 2 half-year courses.
Right.
We're taking what currently exists in 11 that's essential, moving it to 9 and 10, and re-envisioning a potential elective in, like I said, representation in the media. You might look at violence in the media as a particular semester elective. You might, there are other topics you might look at, and have a specific lens for that.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to ask without stirring up trouble.
I think as well, having experience not too long ago in this course, I know there was a lot of conversations between students about kind of English 11. I know there's always kind of that looming idea of, we're at English 11 now. So I think this is an idea to kind of reinvigorate the programming and try to, as Kylene and Michael were talking about, integrate the information that I think can get a bit diluted at that point, maybe, or just it could be maybe more applicable to have it as well with other activities that you're doing in other grades. So I think it's so I guess, is your concern that this will be shifting away emphasis from like English programming in English 11, in which that students would then have like less excitement, or?
No, it actually makes me want to go back to high school and do some of these things that were not available when, a few years ago before he graduated. I worry about controversy, and could some of these be controversial, and do we have a plan to address those things beforehand?
Sure, those are really good questions and things to be concerned about. They won't be required. So a student who elects to take that course is electing to take that course. So that's the first thing. We're not mandating it, which truthfully, even in our current English 11 course, there have been materials that have been of concern for certain parents, and we've provided them with alternative texts and suggested alternatives, and we have a process in the district for when that is in fact a concern. So we always have that. Okay. And it would be by electing to take that course. But even if they elect to take the course, but are finding a particular text or content, unsatisfactory, we absolutely always follow protocol as far as supporting the student and their concerns.
And I knew you would have thought of that. I just wanted to ask and
You
bring
just,
it up.
you just have supported policy work over the last 2 board meetings that allow for that to happen.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Yep.
Parent-student has the right to challenge that work, and then they work together with the families to find alternatives, so.
Excellent.
I do think, though, that some of these classes, like the math, I think about the math and how reticent some kids can be, right? So Graham and his team came up with some really fun math and ways to look at statistics and probability and all that using sports and blah, blah, blah. I'm seeing that same kind of concept in English at grade 11, where they're a little more mature, and having choices around topics that are current and contemporary. And I think that they're going to come back and they're going to present these courses to you, so you're going to have a chance
Right.
to see them. So this is just
No,
kind
and
of
truly, it does.
tasting it.
It does sound fascinating, and
Yeah.
I would love to go back and do it again now.
There's one other aspect to this I think needs to be noted, and that's the relative rigor of what we're talking about. English curriculum always comes down to, you can come up with any focus you want, whether it's American literature or it's violence in the media, or it's all reading and writing. Speaking and listening, yes, but it's really reading and writing. That's where the rubber hits the road. And I think that the electives that are being developed now are going to increase both the quantity and quality of the reading and writing that's taking place in the junior year. And I'll just say, as painful as it is to bring it up, that's when we're preparing kids to do their SATs, and I'm still waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning about last year's SAT scores. So I think this is needed. This is a needed change.
Great, thank you. It sounds great.
Thank you.
Sounds good to me.
I'm sure you'll hear more.
I'm sure we will, yes. And our final item on our agenda tonight is voting practices calendar.
So this was something that you had asked to put on to look at the issue that we had with October 8th and elections and
Oh, yes.
the calendar and how we might address it. I might suggest that we table this to have some little more research.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. I know I have not personally had a chance to really look at it since our last meeting, so yeah.
Just so you know, Brenda will bring you the calendar for 23-24. It's out in the hands of our Teachers Association, and we've already reviewed it with principals and central office staff. We will be bringing it to you. We have to look at some of the dates of elections, like in 24, and we have a primary in February.
Right.
That's huge, that's going to be huge, right? So what does that mean for us? But we have a March workshop, so we
Maybe
flipped.
switch.
Yeah, we flipped.
Okay.
So we'll address some of the concerns you have when we bring that calendar.
Okay, great, that sounds great, thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, we will table that item for another time.
Okay.
Okay. So are we good? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's great.
Do we need a motion?
I think we need a motion to adjourn.
Second. All.
We're in favor, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank
you,
you all
everyone.
very, very much.